Now, the fight or the flight response, which is also known as the acute stress response, is a physiological reaction that occurs in response to a perceived threat, let's say in a physical attack or in a fire hazard. Now, it is a natural and automatic response that prepares the body to either confront the threat directly or flee from it. That's why it is known as fight or flight response. Now, when a person encounters a perceived threat or a dangerous situation, the brain activates the sympathetic nervous system, which triggers a series of changes in the body. Now, these changes are designed to provide the individual with the necessary physical or mental resources to respond effectively to the threat. The key components of the fight or flight response include activation of the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the sympathetic nervous system stimulates the release of stress hormones, which are adrenaline, also known as the epinephrine, and noradrenaline, norepinephrine, from the adrenal glands. Now, these hormones initiate a cascade of physiological changes throughout the body, which we will discuss in the next slide. Now, first, what it does is it acts on the heart to increase the rate, force, and the blood pressure. Now, increased heart rate and blood pressure are key physiological responses that occur during the fight or flight response. They are part of the body's adaptive mechanisms to prepare for immediate action in the face of perceived threat or danger. Now, when the brain detects a potential threat, it signals the release of stress hormones, which are adrenaline and norepinephrine, into the bloodstream. Now, the adrenaline acts on various target organs, including the heart and the blood vessels, leading to the changes such as increased heart rate, and adrenaline also stimulates the heart's pacemaker cells, causing them to fire more rapidly. The faster heart rate ensures that the oxygen and nutrients are delivered quickly to the muscles and organs, enhancing their performance during a fight or flight situation. Now, it also increases the blood pressure via constriction and dilatation of the blood vessels. The constriction is known as the vasoconstriction, which increases the resistance to the blood flow and raises blood pressure. The elevated blood pressure helps to ensure an adequate blood supply to the vital organs, especially the brain and muscles, enabling them to function optimally during the response. Now, the combination of increased heart rate and blood pressure helps to redirect blood flow to areas that require immediate attention. But it is important to note that the chronic elevation of the heart rate and blood pressure due to the prolonged stress or certain medical conditions can have negative health consequences, such as increased risk of cardiovascular diseases. Next is fat tissue. Now, in the fat tissue, it increases lipolysis and fatty acid liberation in order to release the energy in the form of glucose. It converts the fats into glucose to be used by skeletal muscles. There is also glycogenolysis going on, which converts the glycogen into glucose. Next is we're going to discuss is the bladder. Now, the bladder sphincter and detrusal muscles are involved in the control of the urination. The bladder sphincter refers to the muscular ring that surrounds the opening of the bladder and helps to control the flow of urine out of the bladder. The detrusal muscle is the smooth muscle that makes up the muscular wall of the bladder itself. Now, in the sympathetic nervous system, the bladder sphincter tone is increased, leading to the contraction of the sphincter muscle and closure of the bladder outlet. This prevents the involuntary release of the urine and helps to maintain continence. At the same time, sympathetic activation in the sympathetic nervous system relaxes the detrusal muscle, reducing its contractility. This inhibits the urge to urinate and allows the bladder to store urine. Next, we want to discuss is the drive and alertness. Now, the alertness refers to a state of heightened awareness and vigilance. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, it releases stress hormones, particularly adrenaline, which increases heart rate, blood pressure, and respiratory rate as already discussed. Now, these physiological changes enhance alertness by increasing sensory perception, improving reaction time, and promoting a state of heightened mental and physical readiness. The increased blood flow to the brain also contributes to the improved cognitive functions, focus, and concentration. While drive, on the other hand, refers to an individual's motivation, determination, and willingness to engage in goal-directed behavior. Now, the sympathetic activation can influence drive through various mechanisms. One theory is adrenaline release leads to an increase in energy levels, providing individuals with the necessary physiological resources to pursue their goals actively. It can also enhance motivation by inducing a sense of urgency or a desire to overcome challenges. Now, the sympathetic nervous system also interacts with the brain's reward system, influencing the release of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reinforcement. Now, this interaction further contributes to the experience of drive and persistence in pursuing tasks or objectives. Next is pupillary dilation. Now, the pupillary dilation, also known as mydriasis, refers to the enlargement of the pupil, which is a circular ring in the center of the iris. Now, iris is the colored part of the eye. Now, the size of the pupil is controlled by the muscles of the iris. Under normal conditions, the diameter of the pupil is regulated by the autonomic nervous system, especially the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic deviance. Now, the pupillary dilation occurs when the sympathetic nervous system is activated. This can also happen in response to various stimuli such as increased light intensity, emotional arousal, pain, or the release of certain neurotransmitters like norepinephrine. Now, when the sympathetic nerves are stimulated, they cause the radial muscles of the iris to contract, which leads to the dilation of the pupil. This allows more light to enter the eye, improving visual sensitivity. Next we will discuss is the bronchodilation. Now, the bronchodilation, also called bronchodilation, refers to the widening of the airways in the lungs, especially the bronchi and bronchioles. Now, the bronchi are the main air passages that branch off from the trachea and further divide into smaller bronchioles. And the diameter of these airways is controlled by smooth muscles in the walls. Now, this process is mediated by the release of neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, which binds to these receptors and causes relaxation of the smooth muscles. Now, as a result, the bronchi and the bronchioles widen, allowing for increased airflow in and out of the lungs. Now, bronchodilation is beneficial during situations that require increased oxygen intake, such as exercise or when the body is in need of extra respiratory support. Next is skin perspiration. Now, the skin perspiration, also known as sweating, is regulated by sympathetic nervous system. When the sympathetic nerves are activated, they stimulate the sweat glands located in the skin. Now, the sweat glands release sweat, which is mainly composed of water electrolytes and small amounts of other substances. Now, under sympathetic control, sweating can occur as a response to various stimuli such as physical exertion, elevated body temperature, emotional stress, or an increase in the core's body temperature. Sympathetic activation causes the sweat glands to secrete sweat onto the skin surface. This moisture then evaporates, resulting in cooling of the skin and helping the body to regulate body temperature. Next is the effects in kidney. Now, the activation of the sympathetic nervous system stimulates renin release from the kidneys that leads to the generation of the angiotensin 1, which is then converted to the angiotensin 2. Now, this is basically the major part of the renin-angiotensin system, which is also known as RAS. Now, this whole system contributes to the blood pressure. Next is liver. Now, in the liver, it promotes glycogenolysis. Now, what is glycogenolysis? Liver glycogenolysis refers to the process by which glycogen stored in the liver is broken down into glucose molecules. Now, glycogen is a complex carbohydrate and serves as a storage form of glucose in the body. When blood glucose level drops, such as during fasting or between meals, the liver releases glucose from its glycogen stores to maintain a stable blood glucose concentration. Now, the process of liver glycogenolysis is regulated by the hormone glucagon, which is released by the pancreas in response to low blood glucose levels. Now, glycogenolysis is an important mechanism for maintaining blood glucose levels within a normal range and providing an immediate source of energy during periods of fasting or increased energy demand, which is important in sympathetic stimulation. Next is gastrointestinal tract. Now, in the gastrointestinal tract, sympathetic stimulation decreases peristalsis and blood flow. Now, what is peristalsis? Peristalsis refers to the coordinated muscular contraction that propel food through the gastrointestinal tract. Now, it involves rhythmic waves of contraction and relaxation of the smooth muscles in the walls of the digestive organs, including the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. Now, the peristalsis help to mix and move food along the digestive tract, allowing for more digestion and absorption of the nutrients. Now, the sphincters, or the circular muscles, are located at various points along the GI tract. Now, they act as valves controlling the flow of food, liquid, and waste materials between different parts of the digestive system. Now, the tone of the GI tract sphincters, including the lower esophageal sphincter, pyloric sphincter, ileocecal valve, and the anal sphincter, is regulated by the autonomic nervous system. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system promotes sphincter relaxation and increases motility, while the sympathetic nervous system promotes sphincter contraction and decreased motility. Now, the blood flow to the GI tract is also regulated by the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system controls vasoconstriction, which is the narrowing of the blood vessels, reducing the blood flow to the GI tract during periods of stress or exercise, or when it is needed. On the other hand, the parasympathetic nervous system promotes vasodilation, widening of the blood vessels, which increasing the blood flow to the GI tract during the digestive process. Now, these are all the effects of the sympathetic stimulation on various organs. So this was all about today. Keep following sqadia.com for more such videos in the future. Take care.
Watch our medical videos anytime and anywhere. Download sqadia.com app now.